All right. So this is ITS148, and today is April 16th. We only have a couple weeks left of class. See, let me share my screen here. Share this one. And so we are doing chapter 18 right now, and so we're getting into interfacing to an MS SQL database, and today we're going to look at a couple of built-in features that Visual Studio has to allow you to interface to a database very easily, both in a what we call a table view and a record view. And you just need to drag stuff over, and it's the stuff that Visual Studio provides to make form generation very easy. And then later, probably next week, we will look at how to add controls and so on to a form manually a little bit. So so anyway, let me start by pulling down the slides, and the slides are under PowerPoint slides. I think I've already downloaded chapter 18. The other thing is that I want to make sure that we have I want to, in chapter exercises, I want to download the database here because there's the Muroc books database that we're using. That's in there. So let me just put this on the desktop here. Just going to put it on the desktop. And unzip it. All right, here we are. All right, so let me see. I transferred everything. There's not much room left on the thaw space, so I transferred everything to my little USB drive. Let me open up the slides. So I'm just going to start by going through this, how to work with data sources and data sets. Let's see, let me start the slideshow. All right, so in this chapter, we're going to learn how we're going to use a data source to get data that an application requires. So the data source is the database. And we're going to learn about this DataGridView control to present data that's retrieved from a data source, and it's in a tabular form. And it's a nice table that's all built in and everything, and you can even add records, and you can update fields and records and so on, delete records. And then other controls like text boxes to present data that's retrieved by a data source. We're going to see how with these built-in features, how we can then add code to catch errors, which can occur for various reasons. And then we're going to take a look at this data set designer to view the schema for the data set of a data source. We'll learn what a data set is too, I think, or maybe we covered that in the last chapter. And then how to modify a query using the query builder and review SQL statements. And for knowledge objectives, we will describe the use of a connection string in the app.config file. We'll describe the use of the fill method of the table adapter. We'll just see where all these things are, and we'll sort of see how this thing works. Use the end edit method of the binding source object, describe a couple categories of data errors. We'll see that 3 or so different kinds of data errors. Describe the use of the data error event in the DataGridView. Those are certain datas. These are errors that the DataGridView can detect. Like, let's say you have a field that's supposed to be an integer and you try to type in some letters or something, you know, the DataGridView control detects that error. And describe the way the SQL statements are generated for a data source to prevent concurrency errors. See how, like in an update, how we it includes in the where clause the previous values of a record and so on. So this is what, you know, you open up a new form. Let's say it's we're going to name it product maintenance, and we haven't connected it to anything. It's a brand new project. And over here on the left, if we click on this data sources tab on the left, you know, there's toolbox here and there's data sources. Yeah, data sources, this is where your data sources will be. If you're already connected to a database, you'll see that over here, and you'll see the tables and so on. If you don't see anything, there'll just be this window here with this link, add new data source. And you can click on that and go find your Mike Muroc Associates books dataset, whatever, and connect and add this to your project. And then once you do that, then on the left and under data sources, it looks something like this. And here we've connected in, you know, we've only grabbed the products table. And in fact, we're only going to look at 3 of the 4 fields of the products table. There's actually another field here that we're not bothering with, and so we're not including it in our data set. So you know, to do that, once you click on this little link here, it comes up with a window like this. You choose a data source, and we're going to do a database. We can do a service. We could do a service, which is what we do if we're building a web page and we're connecting to a service which connects to a database on the server, and the web page is, you know, in your browser, or an object, or object. These are just other forms of data sources where applications can get data. And then so in this case, we choose our data connection. Well, actually, we do this first. We see our step 2, step 3. This doesn't seem right. Okay. Anyway, we decide that we're going to use the dataset model, and with that, and all that means is that when we connect to a database, we aren't going to connect to the database directly. There's going to be an intermediate. It's almost like a cache database, and that's what this data set is. So when we're operating on the database, when our program is operating on the database, we're actually operating on the data set. And when we're done, when the application is done, then we're going to write back the changes in our data set. We're going to write those back into the database. Okay. So that's how that works. Here's how we connect our application using this. The data source is actual data source is a Microsoft SQL database file, and this is the actual database, and this is the connection string to the database, to this database, and we use Windows authentication to connect it and so on, and you'll see these, and this is where we select the the data source, we're going to do SQL database server file. And this is the, we want to save the name of the connection string. I'm going to just call it that. That's an appropriate name. And then we can go look in our app.config file, and we can see, after we're all done, we see the connection string in there. And we see the connection string's got the data source here. It's got the database here. SQL client, and so on. All right. In this data source configuration wizard, we can choose, the tables. There's a bunch of tables in that database. There's the customers, line item, invoice line items, as you remember, invoices, line items. There's the order options, products, states of the union. And we are just going to look at products, and we're only going to look at, in fact, these three fields in the products table. So this is just mentioning about columns with default values. Lots of times when you're like writing new records, well, let's say this example here. Let's say you're adding a new product to your products table. When you're adding a new product, you may not have any, or you probably don't have any on-hand quantity. You add the product and then you go and you buy it or whatever. Or you may, when you add the products to the, when you add a product to the products table, you may have received your first initial inventory. Let's go with the scenario that we don't have any current products. We don't have any inventory currently on hand, but we want to add the products. We may want to add a bunch of products and then go out and buy inventory and then add and then update our table with inventory on hand. We'd like to have default values for some of the fields. Now, we probably don't need to have a default value for product code, because whenever we mess with any kind of a product in the products table, we're going to be talking about a particular product that has a product code. If we are adding products to the products table, we are going to definitely want to have a description. We're not going to want to add a product without a description. And we also probably am not going to want to add a product without an initial unit price. So the three fields here may not have default values. Whenever you add a new product, you've got to specify those three, the values for those three fields, but not quantity on hand. Sometimes you may want to add a new product with some initial on-hand quantity, and sometimes you may not. So you can specify a default value for on-hand quantity as probably 0. And then that way, whenever you insert a new record into the products table, you don't have to specify something for on-hand quantity. If you do not specify for something for on-hand quantity, it's just going to take the default value, which is probably 0. So working with default values, omit columns with default values from the data set unless they're needed by the application. So you can omit the columns with default values, and that's what we've done. Provide values for those columns whenever a row is added to the data set. All right, so a project with a data set defined by a data source. Okay, so here's a data source and we'll look in here and see what the data set looks like. On the right here, we actually see the database. On the left, we see the data sources and inside products. When we click on this little arrow deal here, it expands down and we can see what fields we're including in the products. And this is what it looks like. And so what we can do, it's pretty cool. Once we have this this data source over there, we can just drag that thing over, just drag it over to here, and this table appears. This DataGridView table appears. And it's all hooked up and everything. And these are these binding methods here that come along with it that connect everything up, and they have all the code in there to handle everything. And does this thing describe it? The controls and objects that are created when you drag a data source to a form. There is the DataGridView control. That's this whole thing here, DataGridView control. And then there's the binding navigator control. That would be like something like this. And then there's the binding source object, something that connects this thing to the data source. Data set object, that's that's the database itself, or the data set which connects to the database, this thing. And then there's a table adapter, which has got information about the table here. And then there's the table adapter manager, which takes care of stuff like when you make changes to the data in the table, it makes sure that you know, the proper SQL statements are executed. So so all we have to do is start, you know, on this products maintenance application. We just click the start. We just click you know, the start button right here, and this thing pops up here. It's kind of neat. It's all populated already with all the product code, description, unit price, like fields we selected. We can make these columns bigger by just dragging. We want to drag this over, and we can make these columns wider and so on, so we can see everything. We'll do that. And this is the code. If we can, you know, click on this form here and view the code. Click on the form, view the code, and we can see there's not much code in there. This is the load handler, and all it does is it executes this fill method inside the products table adapter. Products table adapter right here, this products table adapter, it's got a fill method inside there that we call, and it fills up the table from this. It fills up the DataGridView table. It fills up this table here with the products table inside this, you know, MMA books data set. And then this code, products binding navigator save item. It's if we're gonna you know, add data or no, I'm sorry. We're gonna click on the save button here. This thing executes, which updates all of the. It executes this end edit method inside the binding source. Binding source is what binds the data set to the database. no, it binds the table, the data grid view to the data source, or to the data set. And then this thing, update all, in the table adapter manager, goes through each row and sees the differences between the rows here, that because you might have made some changes here, sees the difference between those and what's in the data set, the MMBooks data set, which is this thing over here, and it updates the stuff in the data set that matters. This fills the data set from the data table. Okay, so we just talked about how to you drag this thing over and it puts a data grid view on the form. Well, we can instead click down on this arrow deal and select details, and then when we drag it over, it puts a details view, or a record view, we sometimes call it. And that looks like this. So this is a different example. Here we're using the customers table, but and we've connected up more fields. So this is a different table than what we're looking at back here. Here we're looking at products, yeah, and these are customers. So we switch to a different table, and so we can drag this over, and it ends up looking like this. And so here, for however many customers are in this table, we can click through by clicking this button here, and we end up clicking through all of the customers, and we can make modifications and so on. So this is the different view. This is one record at a time view, whereas data grid view is the whole table at once. Okay. Now the other thing we can do is, how there's a little arrow thing here, we can click down to switch between data grid view and details view. We can click down on a field, and we can switch between text box, combo box, and list box, I guess. So we can select between those, and then when we select between those, and we drag this thing over, the particular controls that we've selected are going to be the ones that show up. And then, once we get something that looks like this, then we can just mess around with it like we might want to do and make it look better. Might want to make it look like this. Same fields, we move some stuff around. And this is we're doing the customers table now, and so this is what the code that would be generated when we drag over and we create a table form that looks like this. This is the code that will be generated. First of all, there's the fill method from the customers table adapter, talking about these things down here now. It's a different set because we're doing customers instead of products. See, this is the control that's selected. So that's why that's this customer ID text box, and we can click down on that, and we see where it is, where it originates, and so on. So this is the fill method, which fills up this whole thing with all of the records, which we can scroll through by clicking this arrow or clicking this arrow. And this is the binding navigator system save item click. When we save, when we've made an update, this is the code that executes. Okay, there's exceptions that we want to be able to handle using try catch. There's SQL exception. If something happens, we try to do something to the database that's not right, And there's these other exceptions. These are .NET Provider exception classes. Common members of the .NET Provider exception classes is these are properties and a exception class. It's got these properties in this method here. And so the textbook talks about, okay, so if you remember back, okay, so this is dataset customers, right? So back here, it just looks like this. We've got the load handler, and there's just one statement inside this load handler, but we want to consider catching exceptions. We want to add what's in yellow here. So instead of just having this, we put it inside of a try catch, and this is for an SQL exception, and this is the exception we're catching. And so we can display out if there's a database error. So this is something we want to add, exception handling. We want to add, this is for database concurrency exception. If we see here, we're doing this update all. Okay, so it's this here. We're doing this update all. And what we're doing is we're writing the data back from our data set back to the database itself. And so there's going to be this concurrency checking stuff. And so there can be a, there can be a concurrency exception where we're trying to update the we're trying to update rows one by one, and some of them don't update because they were modified in between the time we in between the time we executed the fill method to fill our data set. Okay, so we fill our data set, we make a bunch of changes to it, and then we want to update it, by calling this update all. And as it's updating, it recognizes that some of the records changed since the time we grabbed them out and filled our data set. And so then that causes an exception, concurrency exception. And there's data exceptions too. Can't think of what that would be though. So anyway, code that handles the data here in DataGridView. Okay, then we can also add this method. We can just throw this method in there, and it's a data error event, and so we have to actually go over to the properties window and find the data error event, and then we can double click on that, and that creates the shell here for to add this code right in here. It adds, and so we just type that in. This is the dataset designer. If we go over here and we double click on this XSD line, then this thing pops up, and this is for customers. And so we're only dealing with one table over here. So it's only going to show one table here. It shows all the field names and so on, and it's got this, what this fill adapter is, and this get data. These are the table adapter methods for filling it and getting data, and and if we're going to update and all that kind of stuff, there might be insert command, a delete command, select command. They're all over here. They're all going to be in here in the customers table adapter, this thing here. We'll take a look at this query builder maybe next time. And this is SQL, which we can update and modify. You're familiar with this kind of stuff. Insert into customers, update customers. So here we see this is implementing optimistic concurrency. We have the original values before we did anything with them. And then we're going to perhaps update them. We're going to maybe, correct the spelling of the guy's name. We're going to change his address, put a city in there, whatever. And what has to happen is when we're updating, it won't update unless the values that are currently in there are still the original values. So the customer ID, it'll do this update. It's doing the update on this customer right here. And what this is saying is that it'll only do the update on this customer if the name hasn't changed, the address hasn't changed, the city hasn't changed, the state hasn't changed, and the zip code hasn't changed. If none of those have changed, then it'll go ahead and it'll do the update. If any of those changed, then this update statement won't do the update. And rightly so, because something else happened, because you're going to be overwriting somebody else's change. And delete is the same thing. You got to have this big old where clause in there for optimistic concurrency. Okay, these are some extras from the. Okay, so let's see what this looks like. So I'm going to start a new project, and it's going to be a Windows form application, and I think I'll put it down in my little USB drive here in 148, and maybe I'll call it Chapter 6, Chapter 18. That's the folder, and I'm going to call it, I'll do products, just because that's the first one. All right, I'm going to click on this data sources and pin it. And what I can start by is clicking on add a new data source here. And it's going to be a database, next. And it's going to be a data set, next. And then I got which data connection. I'm going to have a new data connection. I think this is right. It's going to be an SQL database, Microsoft SQL Server database file. Continue. And database file, new or existing, I got to find it. And I think I had it on the desktop, right? Desktop, here. And it's this one, this MMA books.mdf. And so that looks there. I'm going to use Windows authentication. I'm going to click OK. And then it's going to say something like, the database file you are attempting to connect is not compatible with the current instance of SQL Server. To continue, you must upgrade this database file, which will make it incompatible with earlier versions of SQL Server. If you do not want to blah, 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 Do you want to upgrade the database file now? Yes. Okay, now it says, now it's which data connection do you want? Okay, so whatever, I'm just going to leave it at that. You can take a look at the connection string if you want to. Okay, it says it's users slash open slash database slash database, desktop slash database slash MMA books, blah, blah, blah. Next, it says the connection you selected uses a local database file that is not in the current project. Would you like to copy the file to your project and modify the connection? So that means you want to have it appear over here. You want to copy it out, copy it from where it was, put it over here, and then you got to change the connection string too, so it's connected to that one. Do I want to do that? Yes. Okay. Blah, blah, blah. Lo and behold, there is this. And now it's whatever. It's fixed, I guess. All right. Now here, which database objects do you want in your data set? Well, I'm going to pop open tables here, and I think I'm going to do just like what we had saw on our slides, products, and I'm going to pick product code, product description, and unit price. Okay. Here's all the other stuff. There's customers, but I'm not going to pick customers. I'm just going to pick these three, and then I'm going to finish. Okay, so now, so I got this over here, and got that there, and I can just drag this. I'm going to just drag this over. Boom-bitty boom. Close this. Drag it over. Drag it over. Why is it not dragging? Okay, that's. I think I got to drag this. Products. There we go. Whoa, here we go. Products. Now I can just run this thing, see what it looks like. And it doesn't look very good because it's all kind of crammed up and stuff. But you notice down here we've got our data set thing, the binding source, the products adapter, and so on. So here we are, and here we are. This is what it looks like. It's all there. Got these things up here. We can add something. Oops, didn't mean to do that. So let me just close this and shut this off. And I'm going to make this bigger. And I'm going to make this. Wait for it. Oh, never mind. That's not how I do it. Stop. Go like this. I click on this little arrow dealy up here, and I go to Edit Columns, and I got to make the columns bigger right here. So product code is big enough. I'm going to make description be 300, and I'm going to make unit price be 200. No, 150. 50. Oh, it didn't change. Oh, fill weight. I didn't mean to do fill weight. I meant to do width. Fill weight. Put that back to 100 again. Gee, that's good. Sorry, oops, wrong one. This should be 300. Oops. 300. And let's make unit price be, it's back to 100. 150. All right, that's better. So we see now that's a nicer width there. So now when we open this up, see, that looks better. And we can change stuff. Let's make this $64 or some crazy thing like that. Let's make this 58.75, whatever. And then we can save this, save data. Anyway, great. So that's one thing we can do. We can also, let's go back over here, and if we look, so we can change it to details if we want to. We can change this to details, and we can also change this to, you know, they're all textbooks. The product code can be just, that's fine because we're going to adding stuff. Description should be a text box. Unit price should also be a text box, I guess. Okay, so now that it's set to, we set this to details, and we drag this over, and now it looks like that. So now we can make this bigger. Let me grab these three things, make them bigger, and so now when we run this, see right here, we've got this boom, 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 boom. And I can never figure out why these, sometimes it doesn't write back in time or something. 60. 58. So 60, 58, I don't, sometimes these things write back and sometimes they don't. Anyway, so we can save the data. And all right, so if I stop this, now, you know, you can always, as you know, you can click on, this is data source, click on Server Explorer. We can actually look at the database itself, products, and I don't know if the update worked. Let me open this up. We can show table data. No, it didn't update. I think. Delete this thing. All right. So anyway, that's kind of tricky. But the other thing I can show you is over here. You can double click on this XSD, and then this is where this thing opens up here. And if you look over here, the products table adapter. DataGridView. Okay, where is the, if you look on error, so the code, if we're going to, the error code, this is the update all. Okay, so we would put this around a try catch. That's what they're talking about. This try catch, putting it around the fill. It's SQL exception. This is the fill. And then so put a try catch around there, and this is the navigator save item. So that would be the try catch around this one. Update all. Oh yeah. Oh, update all. Right. Update all. It's this update all. And then if we wanted to add that the error code, we have to find so one of these. Data error. So we can double click on data error, and this is where we'd add the data error code, and we see that now the event handler definition has been filled in there. So that's where we would fill in this code, that code in here. So anyway, so that's pretty much chapter 18 and the simple sort of automatic, easy way things. We can talk more about the query builder and so on next time. And then we'll get more into. I'll have probably the last assignment for you next time, and we can go over that. See, currently the last assignment is this friend. Yeah, so I'm going to just do this friends database, and I'm going to have you put it in an SQL in this SQL database, and I'll show you how you can easily add data to a table, add a new table, and so on. It'll be over here in the not here. Server Explorer, how you can add a table. Right click. Here, right click, add new table. You can always open table definition, and you can see the create table statement. And for this particular database, since there's all these constraints already there, these foreign keys are already filled in and everything. All right. Okay, so I think that's maybe all I have for today. Are there any questions? Okay, so I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.